Iron Meat lets players blast their way through 9 action-packed levels, taking down waves of infected soldiers and horrifying bosses straight out of a horror movie. But in its 7 years of development, how did this game, with its simple run-and-gun gameplay and retro-inspired influences, evolve into one of the goriest Contra-like games ever created? To find out, we have to rewind to the start of development back in 2017 and dissect the game's earliest development builds and explore every key decision that shaped the final version of the game. Iron Meat began as a simple homage to run-and-gun classics like Contra, Metal Slug, and Turrican, and features everything fans of this genre would expect. Standard traversal abilities, run left, right, jump, shoot with a steady firing weapon, and enemies to mow down. The pre-alpha build allowed players to point and click to shoot with a mouse. And you'll notice enemies are just robots, and you're just a normal looking guy running around with a gun, and sets the stage for years of changes yet to come. But it clearly has a long way to go before it could stand alone as something great. The next version in 2018 saw the implementation of the game's first music tracks, harkening back to the sound of video game music from the NES era. The look of the player character is also improved here. In order to ground the action in a more familiar, hardcore world, the protagonist now sports badass body armor and a helmet you might expect from a game in this genre. Think Master Chief or Doom guy. The enemies are mechanical androids that simply move from the left and right, posing no real threat to the player. At this point, they mostly serve as targets for the player to attack as they traverse the stage. The level design for the forest level received massive improvements. Weapon upgrades now drop from canisters attached to the walls, and now, instead of running through a sparse and flat environment, bases and towers have been added, giving more depth to the background and positioning enemies at higher spots across the level. These standard platforming elements introduced a welcome verticality of what would later become vital to the tower level. This version of the game certainly looks a lot closer to the final version of Iron Meat, but big changes were just around the corner, ones that take this game to the next level. At the start of 2019, improvements to several new builds saw the addition of new music, a new level, and destructible objects that contain new gun pickups. Enemy designs were also refined, and death animations were changed to explosions. The most significant change, of course, being the introduction of the Meat. Now, instead of only androids and floating robots, players are faced with an entirely new threat, a horde of meat monsters. Immediately, these enemies showed real potential, which led to shaping a narrative around an Earth invasion led by this new all-consuming threat called the Meat. The creation of the Meat opened the door for all kinds of enemy types, ushering in a meatification of the game's existing assets. It also inspired some new ones, including hordes of infected humans and new meat-infected monsters for boss fights, some of which stuck around into the final version of the game. The levels received extensive restructuring, and the difference from the previous version is significant, where the Meat has clearly taken over. Take the tower level, for example. See those floating robot things and laser beams shooting from the sides? Yeah, they're now flying bugs and chains of blood-soaked meat tendrils. Most of the basic design is still there. It's all just been doused with a can of blood, guts, and hungry meat monsters. 2020 saw the game go into full-on meat mode. Previous designs for androids and any robotic-only enemies were scrapped in order to highlight the presence of the Meat. It's starting to seem like with every new build, the Meat begins to consume more and more of the game. Just look at how these common enemies, which were once the red and white androids, have now been replaced with meat-infected humans. Instead of mechanical explosions, these guys now just burst into splats of blood and guts, highlighting the carnage being unleashed. Every level has been given the complete meat makeover too. What was once a forest of green has now become a forest of blood, with visual indications of gore. Tower has been updated to feature hordes of meat monsters running across platforms while keeping the crawling meat chains and malfunctioning wall turrets. Some features from earlier versions make a return as well. Players can now pick up guns from canisters or boxes, and/or shoot down flying drones for weapon upgrades. A new dual-wielding feature was added here as well, giving the players the ability to carry and switch between 2 different weapons at once. The meat bosses also really began to evolve. Along with the malfunctioning tank from level 1, this build saw the first appearance of the Carry Envoy and the Big Rig Contra-like, which for the longest time was simply known as the Meat Bus. Some boss encounters saw some restaging in order to enhance the cinematic feel of these fights. For example, instead of the Carry Envoy fight taking place outside, the fight takes place inside an expanse of dark tunnels. A later version saw the addition of the end of level results screen, showing players' completion time, lives lost, your kill count, and your total score. There were times throughout development where cool features were added, but didn't ultimately add to the overall experience and turn into something better. For example, one version featured a sky level where players could pilot a meat bike with wings and soar above a burning city, and featured a very different boss fight. You have to fight the winged meat bike you rode throughout the level. Talk about a twist!
What a twist!
Even though it was a cool idea to have you fight your own bike, we felt this took away from the run and gun shooter aspects of the game, so it was scrapped. However, it did inspire another level. Instead of flying above, the players now have to fight their way through the city. Since this level took place in an urban environment, and since most of the game's bosses were possessed versions of inanimate objects, the boss for this level was a building, infected by the meat, of course. This level introduced the Monster House boss fight. Just 1 year later, Iron Meat had already seen a ton of graphical improvements, and at every stage, the meatification of a level was considered. But in 2021, one major graphical pass was required to really make the entire game feel cohesive. This build shows just how much the meat had consumed nearly everything and everyone in its path, leaving practically every level covered in blood, guts, corpses, and all of the above. Take the forest level, for example. The differences are extreme. The parallaxing background itself stands as an excellent example of how much the game had improved since the start. Along with the small graphical and UI changes, every boss, like the tank, became indisputably infected. Instead of being mistaken as just a malfunctioning vehicle or piece of equipment, players are fighting an actual monster created by the meat. Multiplayer couch co-op, another foundational element of the retro run and gun genre, was also added. Along with it came other UI changes you would expect during gameplay and on the end of level results screen. From there, the rest of the game began falling into place, with the game's loose narrative in mind. Skyscraper and the Moon levels were introduced accordingly. Very quickly, the remaining levels were completed, tested, and implemented, featuring the final 2 missions in the game's story, taking players all the way to where the invasion started and putting them face to face with the Iron Meat. With the major graphical and design changes out of the way, the remaining days of development focused on technical improvements to gameplay mechanics and showcase new features, like the skin unlock screen, achievements you can earn in-game, fully animated menu backgrounds that can change depending on your progress in the story, and a fully redone soundtrack by Darkman 007. Iron Meat has evolved so much over the years. Just looking back at where it all started, it's incredible that in 7 years an entirely new game spawned from it. We're proud of Iron Meat's transformation into a truly kick-ass run-and-gun shooter with retro roots. While it is an incredibly honest and passionate homage to the games that inspired it, modern features like skin unlocks and achievements make it truly feel like a reinvention of your typical run-and-gun shooter. If this game's development makes one thing clear, it's that an invasion from an evil meat parasite will totally take over your game. We're excited to release Iron Meat on all platforms, with physical editions available for the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5. Head to ironmeat.com for all the links.